The loudspeaker announced another departing train while I realized my mother wasn't coming back. Final boarding for track 11. Suitcases rolled past me. Shoes clicked on marble floors. Someone bumped my shoulder and muttered an apology, but I barely heard it. I kept staring through the station windows because I had just seen our car, slowly passing the entrance. My dad driving, my mom leaning toward the open window, both of them looking directly at me, smiling. For one impossible second, relief flooded my chest. They came back. I lifted both arms and ran toward the glass. "Mom!" she laughed, actually laughed. Then she shouted over traffic, "I bet $50 you can't find your way home." My father slapped the steering wheel like she delivered the perfect punchline. They drove away. Not fast, not angry, just amused. And that was the moment I understood something a 12-year-old shouldn't have to understand. I wasn't lost. I was the entertainment. Standing there, frozen between strangers rushing to trains, questions kept crashing into my head. Why were they so happy this morning? Why had Mom kept asking if I thought I was ready for real life? Why did this feel rehearsed? And why, deep down, did part of me already know this wasn't the first time they'd tested how scared I could become before breaking? The worst question came last. How long were they planning to leave me? Minutes, hours, or forever? Before I go further, I want to ask you something. Please take a moment to like and subscribe the channel. And tell me, where are you listening from right now? And what time is it? Sometimes you hear a story and suddenly remember a moment when someone who was supposed to protect you didn't. If you've ever felt like the lesson in someone else's joke, you'll probably understand why I stayed standing there longer than I should have. I kept believing they would come back. My name is Elena Carter. I'm 31 now. I run a small branding studio in Portland, Oregon. Most people who meet me describe me as calm, organized, independent. What they don't realize is that independence wasn't a personality trait. It was survival training. I grew up in Ridgewood, Ohio, the kind of suburban town where reputation mattered more than reality. My parents owned 3 successful home decor stores. To neighbors, we looked ideal. The station's security room smelled like burnt coffee and printer ink. Everything felt strangely quiet compared to the chaos outside. One officer sat across from me filling out paperwork, while another replayed surveillance footage on a small monitor mounted near the wall. I watched myself on the screen, small, backpack slipping off one shoulder, standing exactly where my mother told me to stay, still waiting, still trusting. Carla, the employee who found me, placed a blanket around my shoulders even though it wasn't cold. "You did nothing wrong," she said softly. That sentence confused me more than anything else, because I still believed I had failed something. Dialogue, officer call with my parents. The officer pressed speakerphone. My mother answered immediately. Bright voice, almost cheerful. "Oh good, you found her. See, she figured it out." The officer paused. "Ma'am, your daughter has been alone here for over 3 hours." Mom laughed lightly. "Yes, that was intentional." Silence filled the room. Even the printer stopped humming. Dad's voice joined faintly in the background. "Tell them it's a life lesson." The officer straightened. "Ma'am, abandoning a minor in a public transit facility is not a lesson. You need to return immediately." Mom's tone changed, not worried, annoyed. "We're at dinner, we'll pick her up later." My stomach dropped. Dinner. They weren't nearby watching. They had truly left. Backyard barbecues, holiday lights. Perfect Christmas cards. My mother, Linda Carter, loved appearances. My father, Greg, loved agreeing with her. Inside the house, affection worked differently. Love came with tests. "Mom, Elena, why are you crying?" "Me, I fell at school." Mom. "So, pain builds resilience." Dad laughing softly. "She'll learn." Mom, "The world isn't gentle. Better she learns here." I remember nodding even when confused, because disagreement meant another lesson. And lessons always involved humiliation. At 9 years old, I asked for help tying my skates at an ice rink. Mom smiled warmly, then walked away. I sat on the bench for nearly an hour while families came and went. When she returned, she clapped lightly. "See, you figured it out." I hadn't. I just stopped asking. That was the system. As an adult, I understand something I couldn't then. They weren't teaching independence. They were studying reaction. How long I would wait. How scared I'd get. how obedient I remained, and every successful test encouraged the next one. The morning felt wrong immediately. Mom made pancakes. Dad turned music up in the car, too cheerful, too rehearsed. Mom kept asking strange questions. Do you think you're mature for your age? Do you trust yourself? Do you panic easily? Every answer made them exchange amused glances. Even at 12, my stomach tightened. I just didn't know why. Me. Where are we going? Dad, adventure day. Mom smiling, a real-world experience. Me, like a museum. Mom, better. They laughed together. And I remember thinking, I hope I pass whatever this is. Union City Terminal felt enormous. Echoing ceilings, announcements bouncing off stone, people everywhere. I stayed close to them instinctively. Mom stopped near a pillar. Wait right here, she said. We'll park the car and grab lunch. How long? 15 minutes. Dad added loudly, You're not a baby, Elena. People nearby glanced at me. Heat rushed into my face. I'll stay, I said quickly. They walked away. I watched until they disappeared. 15 minutes passed, then 30, then an hour. I replayed instructions repeatedly. Stay here, don't move, be responsible. I was terrified of doing the wrong thing more than being alone. That realization still unsettles me. I wasn't afraid of strangers. I was afraid of disappointing them. Woman passing. Honey, are you okay? Me quickly. Yes, my parents are coming back. She nodded but looked unconvinced. I forced a smile because asking for help felt like failure. Time stretched. Crowds shifted. The station grew louder. My stomach hurt from hunger. I counted tiles on the floor, counted announcements, counted breaths. 2 hours passed. Then I saw the car. I ran toward the windows. Relief exploded inside me. They came back. Mom leaned out the passenger window. Wind moved her hair. She looked delighted. I told your father you'd still be standing there. Dad laughed. Then she shouted, I bet $50 you can't find your way home. They drove away, still laughing. And something inside me went completely silent. This wasn't delay. This was intentional abandonment. The fear wasn't accidental. It was the goal. I remember thinking, they want to see what I do next. I wandered the station. Sat, stood, cried quietly in bathrooms. Checked entrances repeatedly. Each passing minute changed the emotion. I had $9, no phone. No address memorized. No permission in my mind to ask anyone for help, because asking meant failing the test. Maybe they're watching. Maybe this is part of it. If I panic, I lose. That belief kept me trapped longer than anything else. A station employee approached me, mid-S, kind eyes, name tag read Carla. You've walked past me 5 times, she said gently. Are you waiting for someone? I tried to lie. I'm fine. She crouched slightly. When did your parents leave? My throat tightened. The question broke something open. They drove away. Her expression changed instantly. Not annoyance, not disbelief, concern. You're safe, she said firmly. Come with me. Those words felt unfamiliar. Safe. Transit officers arrived. They asked questions carefully. Names, address, description of the car. One officer checked surveillance footage. Another handed me crackers and water. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until I started shaking. Officer, they left you here intentionally, me whispering. It was a lesson. He exchanged a look with another officer. That's not a lesson, he said quietly. That's abandonment. Hearing the word stunned me, because it matched how it felt. When officers finally reached my parents by phone, I heard only fragments. No, ma'am. This is serious. You need to return immediately. Then the officer covered the receiver and looked at me. His expression told me everything before he spoke. They're refusing to come back right now. That was the moment I understood. I wasn't waiting anymore. My life had just changed direction without my permission. That moment split my childhood in half. Before the call, part of me still believed this was temporary. After hearing her voice, relaxed, unconcerned, I realized something terrifying. My fear had been the entertainment, not the outcome. Officer, ma'am, if you don't return, we will involve Child Protective Services. Mom sighed dramatically. You're overreacting. Dad added casually, kids today need resilience. The officer's jaw tightened. I'm documenting this refusal. Mom replied. Fine, do what you need to do. Click. The call ended, no goodbye, no question about me, nothing. The room changed instantly. The officers stopped treating the situation as a misunderstanding. One of them leaned toward me gently. "Elena, we're going to make sure you're safe tonight." Safe tonight. The wording felt strange, like I might not be going home. They'll come back, they always come back. But another thought pushed through quietly. What if they don't want to? 2 hours later, a woman named Janice Morno from Child Protective Services arrived. Soft voice, sharp eyes that noticed everything. She sat beside me instead of across from me, a small detail that made me feel less interrogated. "Can you tell me what happened today?" I hesitated, because telling the truth felt like betrayal. Mom always said family problems stayed inside the family, but Janice waited patiently. No pressure, so I told her about the bet, about the laughter, about other lessons. Her pen stopped moving halfway through. "Janice, has this happened before?" Me quietly, "Not like this." "Janice, have they ever left you somewhere intentionally?" I nodded. "Ice rink, mall parking lot, grocery store once." Her expression hardened slightly. "Okay," she said softly. "Thank you for telling me." That was the first time an adult treated my experiences as serious instead of normal. Janice reviewed surveillance footage. We watched together. The moment my parents drove away played on repeat. Their faces clear. Laughing, pointing back toward me, Janice exhaled slowly. "That's important evidence." Evidence, another unfamiliar word. Because at home, nothing counted as proof, only interpretation, and their interpretation always won. Confusion turned into embarrassment. Embarrassment turned into anger. But underneath both, something deeper formed, relief. Someone else finally saw it. The ride Janice drove me to a temporary placement home. The sky had turned dark. Streetlights blurred past the window. I kept expecting my parents to call. To apologize, to say it went too far. They didn't. "Janice, you're very calm." "Me, am I in trouble?" She shook her head. "No. You were placed in an unsafe situation." I stared out the window. "They said it makes me stronger." Janice paused before answering. "Strength doesn't come from being abandoned." That sentence stayed with me for years. The foster home belonged to a retired teacher named Mrs. Halpern. She greeted me with warm eyes and no questions. Just, "You must be exhausted. Let's get you settled." She offered soup, clean pajamas, a lamp left on in case I felt scared. I didn't cry. Not yet, because part of me still believed this was temporary punishment for failing the test. Morning arrived quietly. No angry lecture, no sarcastic jokes, just breakfast. Mrs. Halpern asked one gentle question. "Do you take sugar in your oatmeal?" I nearly cried right there, because no one had ever asked a preference before. Later that day, Janice returned. Her tone was different, more serious. "We spoke with your parents." My stomach tightened. "What did they say?" She hesitated. "They described the situation as an educational exercise." Educational exercise. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, me. "Are they mad, Janice? They're more concerned about legal consequences." Not worried about me, about themselves. That realization landed heavily. Janice continued carefully. "They mentioned something else that concerns us." I looked up. "What?" She opened a folder. Inside were notes, dates, locations. "Your parents told us they've been teaching you independence through planned challenges for years." Planned challenges. Suddenly every confusing childhood moment aligned. Ice rink, mall, locked out of the house once. They weren't accidents. They were experiments. I wasn't unlucky. I wasn't overly sensitive. I had been studied, measured, tested repeatedly. The train station wasn't escalation, it was culmination. And the bet, just proof they no longer saw me as a child, only an outcome. I remember sitting perfectly still, not crying, not yelling, just understanding something irreversible. My parents weren't protecting me from the world. They were recreating danger themselves. Within days, a hearing was scheduled. Family court. I wore borrowed clothes that felt too formal. My parents arrived smiling politely like nothing unusual had happened. Mom hugged me lightly. "There you are," she said. "Quite an adventure." Adventure, I pulled back slowly. "Mom, you made this bigger than it needed to be." Me, I didn't call CPS. Dad chuckled. "They don't understand our parenting style." parenting style. Even then, they framed everything as philosophy. Not harm. Judge, you intentionally left your child alone, Mom confidently. We were nearby. Officer testimony contradicted her. Dad added, children must learn resilience early. The judge leaned forward. At the expense of safety, Mom smiled calmly. She succeeded, didn't she? The room went silent. For the first time, I saw adults react to my parents the way I always felt inside. Uneasy. Janice placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. The judge ordered temporary custody review. My parents' confidence cracked slightly. Not dramatically, just enough to reveal fear underneath. As we left the courtroom, I overheard my mother whisper to my father, "She's ruining everything over one joke." One joke. I realized then something important. They still didn't believe they had done anything wrong, which meant the real confrontation hadn't happened yet, and the revenge that changed our family forever hadn't even started. The court didn't immediately remove me permanently from my parents. That's important. Real life rarely delivers instant justice. Instead, the judge ordered mandatory family evaluation, supervised visits, and parenting assessment. Legally, my parents framed themselves well. Successful business owners, no criminal history, clean home. They didn't look abusive. They looked unconventional, and that made everything harder. Because psychological harm rarely looks dramatic enough for immediate punishment. But something had changed. For the first time, their behavior was being observed, and observation terrified them. My mother stopped laughing, not publicly. At supervised visits, she became overly affectionate, too gentle, too rehearsed. She brought gifts every time. Designer backpack, new phone, clothes I hadn't asked for. It wasn't love, it was reputation repair. Mom smiling brightly. "See, we always take care of you." Me quietly. "I didn't need things, I needed you to come back." Her smile tightened. "That's what people told you to say, isn't it?" Janice watched silently from across the room. Mom lowered her voice. "You embarrassed us in court." That sentence told me everything. Even now, she believed I had caused the problem. I realized something uncomfortable. They weren't trying to reconnect. They were trying to regain control of the narrative. And control required one final step. They needed me to admit it was a misunderstanding. 2 weeks later, my parents requested an unsupervised outing. Therapists approved a short trial visit. Public place only. 2 hours. I agreed. Part of me still wanted proof that things could change. We met at a busy outdoor cafe. Mom hugged me tightly. Dad smiled carefully. Everything felt staged. Mom stirred her coffee slowly. "We've been thinking." Dad nodded. "This situation has gone too far." Mom leaned forward. "If you tell the counselor you misunderstood the station incident, we can put all of this behind us." I blinked. "You want me to lie?" Her voice softened dangerously. "Not lie. Reframe," Dad added calmly. "Families protect each other." The air felt heavier, because I suddenly understood. Their goal wasn't reconciliation. It was record correction. If I retracted my statement, the investigation would weaken. Their reputation would survive untouched. Hope died quietly in that moment, not dramatically, just permanently. I answered carefully. "I won't change what happened." Mom's eyes hardened instantly, and that's when the final escalation began. She smiled again, but it no longer reached her eyes. "Then we may need to discuss living arrangements." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Dad slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a document, a behavioral evaluation request, filed by them, claiming I suffered from anxiety exaggeration and attention-seeking responses. My hands went cold. They were trying to portray me as unstable. If successful, my testimony could lose credibility. Custody would return fully to them, and the train station incident would be reframed as my emotional overreaction. "Me, you're saying I imagined it," Mom calmly. "We think professionals should evaluate why you reacted so extremely," Dad added. "We're protecting you from long-term embarrassment." I stared at them. They weren't apologizing. They were escalating, trying to rewrite reality legally. That was the final line. Right there at that cafe, I understood. They had never stopped testing me. The train station wasn't the last lesson. This was. Would I submit to their version of reality or defend my own? For the first time, I didn't argue, I didn't cry, I didn't defend myself. I simply nodded. Okay, I said. Their relief was immediate. They thought I was surrendering. They didn't realize I had just stopped reacting emotionally and started planning. I documented everything: emails, court filings, their evaluation request, text messages asking me to correct the narrative. Therapists already involved noticed the contradiction, because genuine concern sounds different from reputation management. Janice advised quietly, "Truth works best when presented calmly." So I waited and watched, because people who manipulate rarely stop at one attempt. They expose themselves if given time. My parents organized a large family dinner weeks later, relatives invited, friends present, community members included. They framed it as reconciliation, but I knew what it really was: a public reset. They planned to show everyone we were fine, to overwrite the story socially. They expected me to cooperate. I attended. Calm, observant, prepared. Dinner conversation flowed normally at first. Mom laughed loudly. Dad told stories. Relatives watched carefully, sensing tension underneath politeness. Then Mom raised her glass. "I'm so grateful our family moved past misunderstandings." There it was, the moment. Everyone looked at me. Waiting for confirmation, I spoke quietly. "I'm glad we're talking openly." Mom smiled confidently. "Yes, communication fixes everything." I nodded. "It does." Then I placed a small folder on the table. No anger, no drama. Just documentation. Me. "Since this dinner is about clarity, I want everyone to understand what happened." Mom's smile faltered. I continued calmly. "This is the surveillance report confirming I was left alone for 3 hours." Murmurs spread. Dad shifted uncomfortably. I added another paper. "This is the voicemail where Mom called it a bet." Gasps. Then the final document. "And this is the evaluation request filed after I refused to say it was a misunderstanding." Silence fell completely. One aunt whispered, "You tried to say she was unstable." Mom's face flushed. "That's not," I spoke gently. "I'm not angry. I just don't want confusion about why I don't feel safe returning home." No shouting. No accusations. Only facts. And facts carry weight no emotion can replace. Relatives began reinterpreting years instantly. "Oh, remember the mall incident?" I thought that was strange. They always joked about toughening her up. The narrative shifted in real time. Not because I attacked them, because people finally had context. My parents realized too late their authority depended on secrecy, and secrecy was gone. Mom tried one last defense. "We were preparing her for the real world," I answered softly. "The real world protects children. It doesn't abandon them for entertainment." No one laughed. No one agreed with her. The room's emotional gravity moved away from them. And toward me, that was the true revenge. Not humiliation, loss of unquestioned credibility. Court evaluators reviewed new information. The psychological evaluation request was dismissed. Custody arrangements changed permanently. I chose limited contact, not out of anger, out of peace. My parents never publicly apologized, but they stopped defending the story because no one believed it anymore. Years passed. I built my business, moved states, created a life where independence came from choice, not fear. Sometimes people ask if I hate them. I don't. Hate keeps you tied to the lesson forever. Distance set me free instead. The train station used to represent abandonment. Now it represents clarity. That was the day I learned something powerful. I was never the weak one in the story. I was simply the only person willing to face reality without turning it into a joke. They thought they were teaching me survival, but what I actually learned was boundaries, and boundaries changed everything. I want to ask you honestly, if your own parents called your fear a lesson, would you forgive them? Was what they did parenting or control? And at what point does protecting yourself become the only healthy choice? Tell me what you would have done. I read every comment, and your perspective always matters here. Please subscribe before you leave if you liked the video. Thanks for watching.